I've talked on a recent real estate show about the inspections that buyers do once they've purchased a home. This show is going to get into a little bit more about the problems and the concerns that could come up during a home inspection. It's the real estate show. Welcome to the Real Estate Show. My name is Rick Naples. I am the owner-broker of Zone Realty LLC. You zone your home, a brokership here in the state of Connecticut. I wanted to talk on this show about home inspections. And I've mentioned it several times before on previous shows on the type of inspections that can be done. But what do you actually do in a home inspection? Well, first of all, you've already purchased the house, or at least have a contractual agreement to purchase the home, and you're going to meet your home inspector at the house. You show up at the house and you go in with the home inspector, and usually some home inspectors prefer to do the outside of the house first and then the interior. Some do the interior and then the outside. It depends on the inspector. You need to shadow the inspector. In other words, you're going to pair with them, follow them around, ask them questions, and look at the different things that they do. You want to really get to know the property that you're purchasing. And this is really important. You're going to be making a pretty huge investment, so you want to make sure that you know how the house works, what the house has to offer, and if there are any problems or concerns that you need to be aware of if you're going to move forward with the purchase. So your inspector now begins to go through the home, and they're going to look at everything there is to look at. If it's the outside of the home, they'll look at things like the way the house is sided, the outside of the windows, they'll look at the roof line, the gutters, they're going to take a look at the landscaping and the pitch of the yard and so on and so forth. And they're going to bring up suggestions or recommendations if they see any. Now, one of the nice things about a home inspection report is it's going to break down things for you. It's going to show you exactly what it is, if there's anything that should be tended to right away, or if there's anything that you might consider doing in the near or distant future. Home inspectors have been trained to look for issues. They're very straightforward, and they're going to provide you with all the information that you need if you should decide to act on it. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. So now you've gone into the home and you're now looking at the inside of the home. Now, inspectors want to be able to see corner to corner in each room because they want to look at things like the conditions of the floor, the ceiling, the wall conditions, where the outlets are, switches, and so on and so forth. The inspectors are going to take the time to turn on switches, to check plugs, to look at the appliances and turn on all the appliances. They're going to go to the oven. They're going to turn the oven on. They're going to turn all the burners on. They're going to run the water in the sink. They'll turn on the garbage disposal if there is one. They'll run the dishwasher. They go through all of the appliances, making sure that they are in good working order. They're also going to look at the lines in the house. Are the cabinets on the walls straight? Do the doors open and close correctly? What do the countertops look like? And so on and so forth. You're going to be, as I said, shadowing the home inspector. So as you're going through the home and you're looking at things, you have that professional second set of eyes. Now, you've already had that with your realtor when you went to go look at the home and decide to purchase it, right? But I mean, as a buyer, you've looked at a lot of houses and you finally get a house that you think is going to work for you. And you go into the house and you spend maybe 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes walking around the house, getting that buyer's vibe, as I've said before, getting a good feel as to whether or not this house is going to work for you or not work for you. And then you've decided on your offer, and with your realtor, you make the offer and it gets accepted. But you really have not been in the house to really look at it. And that's why a home inspection is so important. Now, I've had some buyers say to me, would we be in a better position if we make our offer and we don't request any inspections? Well, you could do that, but you're going to put yourself at risk, because if you don't do inspections, you don't know what you're going to get. I mean, you may purchase the house and move in and find there's all kinds of unseen problems that you weren't aware of. Sometimes you can make your offer and say that you're not going to do an inspection for renegotiation purposes, that you're just going to do an inspection for your own knowledge, but you have to make sure that your realtor sets it up in such a way that if there is a major problem and you've given up your right to negotiate on it, you want to be able to get out of the deal. Home inspections do allow you the time to spend in the home to be able to go through it from one thing to another. Now, the home inspector is going to go through all of the different mechanics of the house also. This is when you spend some time in the basement of the home. You're going to look at the furnace, you're going to look at the fuse box and the electrical supply that comes into the house and how the house functions, its utility functions, and so on and so forth. The inspectors are going to go through all that. They're going to look for things in the basement that you might not be aware of. They're going to look for signs of, have there been any water damage? Is there any present water damage? Is the furnace working properly? Is the furnace set at the right temperature so you're getting enough hot water? The electrical box, does it have current circuit breakers in it, or are they old-fashioned fuses? Are those circuit breakers hooked up correctly? I'm always surprised when the home inspector takes the cover off the electrical box, and I've asked, why do you do that? And one inspector said, well, I do it for two reasons. Number one, I'm looking to see that all of the circuit breakers are wired in correctly, because believe it or not, there are people that will jury rig a circuit breaker. In other words, they want to put additional plugs in someplace, and they'll bring it into the box and hook it up so that a fuse is carrying more current than it should be, should there be a number of things on. So they look to make sure everything is wired correctly. They also look in the box to make sure there's no rodents in there. I know that sounds gross, but if you get mice that may have gotten into the basement of the house, one of their favorite places to go is they like to go inside that electrical box because it's nice and cozy in there and build a little nest. Whether they chew on the wires or not could be a possibility. So they look to make sure there's no rodents in there, there's no rodent damage, there's no bugs in there, the wiring is correct, and so on and so forth. And you get to see this. In all the time that you're going to be living in the house, you may not ever take the cover off the electrical box and look inside. So this is an opportunity for you to actually look at the guts and the operation of that electrical box. They're going to continue going on through the basement, as I said, looking for any kind of water damage. And this will give you an opportunity as a buyer to see what's going on in the basement. Now, if it's a finished basement, that has different things that the home inspector is going to look at as opposed to an unfinished basement. I've been in homes where it's a much older home here in Connecticut, and it still has a dirt floor in the basement. This can bring up some other issues, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. But if it's an old-fashioned basement where the basement basically is just a basement for the utilities, it could be a crawl space type basement or just a basement that you really don't want to go down inside. The inspector is going to do certain things down there. They're going to look at certain things, but they're also going to be looking at things like if the house has oil for fuels, they're going to look at the oil tank. Is the oil tank in good condition? If it's gas, they're going to look at the gas meters and see how the gas is coming in, look at the pipes, look at the way things are running. They're going to look at the water system and the water meter and how those goes on. Every single thing. Now, as I'm talking, you're probably saying, Rick, this is going to take a lot of time, isn't it? Well, yes, it is. I've been inspections that have taken 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, sometimes even more, depending on how involved the house is and the size of the house. And it's important that you as a buyer take the time to be there with the home inspector. In other words, if you got to take a day off from work, take the day off from work. Remember, you're purchasing something that's worth thousands and thousands of dollars. It may be the largest purchase you ever make in your lifetime. And if this is going to be, I've had the term used, your forever home. This is the house that you're buying, that you plan to live in for a number of years and raise your family in, and so on and so forth. You really want to get to know the home. And this is the opportunity that you have to ask questions. There's no such thing as a dumb question. Home inspectors are people that have a lot of information. They've been through very specific training. They've looked at hundreds of houses. They know what they're looking for. They know what the current codes are in the town to which you're buying. They can tell you the things that you need to be aware of. Now, sometimes they'll point out something that is, it's okay, but it should be this way, or it needs to be this way. They're going to look at things like, let's say, for instance, the homeowner over the years has made modifications. And what I mean by that is maybe they've remodeled the basement on their own, maybe they put a deck up on their own, or something along those lines. The inspector's going to look at that stuff because some things require that permits be pooled with the town. And that, again, is so those items can be inspected and make sure they're done properly and up to code. A lot of the self jobs, the things that some of us weekend warriors might do, might not exactly meet the code requirements. So don't be surprised if your inspector does something that you think is a little weird. Like, for instance, they crawl under the home to look at the bottom of the house if there's a crawl space. They go under the deck to see how the joists are attached to the house. Or if it's a deck that's cantilevered off the back of a house, they're going to look at the way that it's fastened. And they're going to point out and make recommendations. They're also looking for signs that may require other types of inspections. Now, what do I mean by other types of inspections? Well, let's say, for instance, you have a finished basement in the home to which you are purchasing. That's great. It may be completely finished. Maybe there's a kitchen area down there or a separate bathroom. Maybe there's a bedroom downstairs or a separate laundry room. And these things are all wonderful because they're enhancements to the home and its extra living space. But is it heated properly? Is it cooled properly? Does it have enough plugs to use around? Are those on the right circuit breakers, and so on and so forth? If it's a living space downstairs and people are actually going to be down there on a daily basis or whatever it might be, one of the things the inspector may recommend is something that's called a radon test. What is radon? Well, radon exists in everybody's homes. It exists in the air that we breathe. Radon is an invisible gas that happens from the breakdown of organic material. Tree falls down, bushes die, flowers die, all that stuff falls into the ground and decays over time, even us human bodies, animals, and so on and so forth. And you do have a radioactive or a gas that forms as that stuff naturally decays. This gathers up in the ground. And because we build homes and we enclose those homes, the gas can seep in through the ground and gather in those enclosed areas. And it's been shown over the years that exposure to that combined enclosed gas can cause certain medical difficulties in us humans. So you want to have a radon test done. What does a radon test involve? Well, usually the inspector will have the radon people come in and they put a little indicator or a little sensor down in that enclosed area, usually your basement, And they'll tell you that for the next 24 hours, everything needs to be closed up because that's going to get a reading of what the radon gas is in that area. And there are federal guidelines that state what's considered safe, what's considered something that's an issue or a problem or a concern. They'll pick up that test 24 hours later, and they send it to the lab where it's analyzed, and it gives you what that reading is. Now, there could be a problem. Let's say, for instance, the radon in the basement reads really, really high. It's above the federal recommendations. Well, now what do? Do you not buy the house? Maybe not. I mean, sometimes it just requires that the space be ventilated once in a while. I had an old timer say to me one time, you want to get rid of a radon gas problem in your basement, just keep a window cracked open. That can work. It's not really recommended, especially you don't want to have a window open during the winter time, or if the windows don't have screens, you got to worry about critters getting into your basement, when they're seeking someplace warm and so on and so forth. So maybe that's not the way to go. There is what's called a radon mitigation system that can be purchased that allows fans to run that kind of ventilate that space at all times. But again, you don't want to cross that bridge unless there's actually an issue. As long as those radon readings are where they're considered to be normal, it's not going to be a problem. You'll probably get a higher radon reading when you have an unfinished basement. In other words, remember what I mentioned earlier, the dirt floor? Those spaces, usually if they're enclosed tight or if it's an old-fashioned stone foundation, not the poured concrete type, you're going to get a lot of gases that leak in from the ground into that basement space. So maybe that basement space is high in radon, but it's not living space, it's just storage space, so that's fine. It's not a big deal. It's the living space, or if you plan to remodel or finish the space, or if you already have that space where you have a bedroom where someone might be sleeping, that you have to really be concerned of what the radon levels are. Now, what other kinds of tests can this home inspector recommend that you do once they're going through the house? It depends on what they see, right? If they see evidence of insect infestation or damage, this could be things like carpenter ants, termites, beetles, whatever, they're probably going to recommend that you have an inspection done by an expert to tell you what's going on, right? Termite damage, that's pretty serious. If there's termite damage in the property, especially if they find active termites, that's a big issue, and that's something that you want to talk about, If it's old damage, they're going to look at the structural integrity. Was the damage repaired, or does the damage need to be repaired, and so on and so forth. So they're going to be looking for signs of that and recommending whether or not another inspection should be done. Home inspectors do not inspect the septic system. If there's a septic system because the house is not connected to the city sewer line, they're going to recommend that you do a septic inspection. Now, I just want to talk about that just for a moment. Septic inspections are quite interesting. You're going to have the inspector come out. Usually what happens in the negotiation process, if there's a septic system, is the seller agrees to have the tank pumped out because the inspector needs to see the tank itself. They're going to find where the opening is, open it up, and put a camera down inside and look at the tank. Make sure that the inlets and the outlets and stuff are working correctly and so on and so forth. There's no leaks, that the system is able to leak out to the proper leaching fields, that the leaching fields are correct, and all this different type of stuff that they do. And it's kind of interesting to go to those inspections. My only recommendation is you have to remember what a septic system is. This is where all of the waste from the household goes. So it's stored in a tank. So when the inspector opens that tank up, I recommend you don't stand too close because there's usually a very interesting smell that comes out of that tank. So you don't want to be too close to it. but you do want the inspector to inspect it thoroughly, because if you're purchasing a home and the septic system is not functioning correctly, that's a big issue, and that's an issue that you might want to bring to the seller's attention. Now, having talked about all that I've talked about as far as inspections are concerned, what do you do when these problems and concerns come up? I mean, do you just say, I don't want the house and back away from the house, or do you change your offer? What do you do? Well, once you get the reports, the results, you get your results of the radon test, the home inspection test, the septic if it's needed, even well water, if there's well, you get the results from that. You now sit down with your buyer representation, your realtor, and you go through those reports. The realtor will be able, from their experience, to tell you what items are those items that you should negotiate on. In other words, you should go back to the seller and ask the seller to take care of those repairs or concerns that are happening so that you can move forward with the purchase of the house. Now, I'm not talking about cosmetic issues. I've had people get inspection reports and want to negotiate with the seller because they don't like the color in the house. They want all the house, repainted. They want the walls repainted. They want the carpets torn up, whatever it might be, and the floors refinished. No, cosmetics, those you kind of got to say that's stuff that you need to do as the buyer. You're going to do them anyways to make the home yours. What I'm talking about is things that come up in the inspection report that maybe need to be changed. In other words, if there's a plumbing issue, leaks someplace, that has to be repaired before you move into the home, correct? If the inspector has found, insects, you want the home treated. If the inspector's found high radon counts, you want that addressed. Your realtor is going to guide you through how to negotiate on those items in order to make the deal move forward. Now, what's the guarantee that if you negotiate on those items that the seller's going to do that stuff? Well, that's handled in what we call a walkthrough. And I've mentioned this before too. The walkthrough is your opportunity to go through the house before you go to the closing table. It's really important to do that because usually the walkthrough is done the day of the closing. So the house has been emptied out, the seller has taken all their personal property out of the home, and the home is now vacant. It's now getting ready for you to move in. So now you have the opportunity with a little checklist and your inspection report to go through the house and make sure everything looks right. If there was a washer and dryer, the washer and dryer is still there. The refrigerator's still there, the stove's still there, that everything is still functioning correctly. That the electricity is still on, even though the seller's going to call the electric company to have the electric turned off because it's going to be switched to your name. You want the lights on so you can go through the home. If there were anything that you renegotiated on, in other words, problems that you wanted fixed before you close, this is your opportunity to go in and see if those things are done. And if they needed professional attention, you want to see the receipts, or the seller has to bring those receipts to the closing to see that it was professionally done. I've had a lot of sellers say, I can take care of that. I'll fix that. I'll do that. Talk to your realtor, because there's a lot of things that the homeowner can fix on their own. They're minor things, but there are some things that a professional tradesperson has to come in and take care of, especially when it's plumbing and electrical. So you want to make sure that those things are done. You want to be confident that the home you're purchasing is what you see, what you get. It isn't an as-is purchase. In other words, you're not buying it as it is. In this case, you've done your inspections and you're negotiating to have those things fixed that need attention to. Now, you're not going to be able to negotiate on things that may need to be done in the distant future. Those are kind of the risks you take when you buy a home. And there's no guarantee that once you occupy the home that nothing's going to go wrong with it. Houses constantly need maintenance. Houses need attention all the time. So the seller can't guarantee the house is going to be perfect forever and ever. So make sure that you talk to your realtor and you go into your purchase, as I say, open-minded, knowing that if you're buying especially an older home, there are going to be maintenance items that you're going to have to do over time. My name is Rick Naples, and this is The Real Estate Show. Thank you very much for watching. Stay tuned for the next show where I'll talk about some more problems and concerns in this whole process. I'll see you next time.
The Saybrook Fish House in Canton has been serving fresh seafood, chicken, and prime steaks for 40 years. Experience one of our 3 unique dining room settings, 2 with fireplaces, or relax in our cozy pub with a craft beer, wine by the glass, or specialty cocktail while enjoying a meal from our new lighter fare pub menu. Serving lunch and dinner Tuesday through Sunday. Reservations accepted for parties of 2 to 42. Gift cards always available. The Saybrook Fish House, nestled at the crossroads of routes 44, 202, and 179 in Canton.
Follow us on Instagram at nutmeg.tv.